It is a book that has caused quite a stir in some sectors, one that contradicts a lot of what has been reported by researchers in recent years. Former NFL star Merril Hoge is one of the authors of Brainwashed, the bad science behind CTE and the plot to destroy football. Merril Hoge joins us today. Thanks so much for being here. This book has caused a stir, right?
Yeah, you know, it was interesting what you said there, you know, about the scientists and how it's been presented. That's actually maybe why we are in the situation that we're in, is that you've had people that have signed Hippocratic oaths who have abused it. And I refer to Anne McKee, for example.
Right.
There's the scientific paper called the 90% paper that she wrote.
Right.
And she writes in there, caution, you can't use this study because of the methodology is so crooked, and there's two different types of testing. To give anybody any sense of degree of disease of CTE, it is in the scientific literature. But when she's asked in the media or quoted about that scientific paper, she says, and I quote, "I got to believe all football players have that after that science paper." There's nothing in that scientific piece of paper that would even remotely give you any inkling to say that in the public arena. And people believe that, people buy that, but I don't blame them because that's what they're hearing.
Right.
And once I discovered the real truth of what science is really saying, is what really inspired that book.
I want to fill people in. It's out of Boston University, the study you're talking about. It studied the brains of 111 former NFL players and found in 110 of them there were signs of CTE. And so a lot of people might just hear that by itself and go, man, that's enough to say, hey, there's a pretty good chance there's some correlation.
Right, because they don't ask the question, okay, first of all, that's a numerator. It's the number injured. What's the denominator? It's not 111. It's 27,000 former players. Then if you look at the methodology and you start reading the paper and understand what you're looking at, over half of those brains had what? Another brain disease. This is a scientific fact. Once you discover a brain that has another brain diseases, CTE has to be excluded. Why? Because they don't know what causes it, and they don't know what it causes. 54% of them did. They don't put that in the paper, and that's about as corrupt a science as you can possibly do. When you fail to sell that, you fail to give that, that is corrupt science. And that's largely what has happened with all the scientific literature. It's been spun like that, it's put in the New York Times, and not all the facts have been presented.
But the same people who are criticizing your book go on to say this. There was a study in 2015 at the Mayo Clinic, right? And you're familiar, you know this already. 198 brains studied of individuals who never played contact sports, and in not one case did they find signs of CTE.
Right, okay, that scientific paper, have you read the scientific paper?
No.
Here's what the scientific paper also says. All those brains came from a diseased brain bank. So that is not a controlled study if it's in a diseased brain bank. So that's the first flaw.
But they didn't have signs of CTE, though. I mean, even if they were...
Let me finish.
Okay.
The methodology, they did two types of testing on the brain. So here's what they did. It'd be like you and I getting a math test. You get a first grade math test, I get a graduating geometry test. We both do our test. It says, you know what, you're better at math than I'm at math. Well, we didn't. How can that be when you did the first grade math test and I did an advanced geometry test? You can't do that. They did two types of testing. The people that they found CTE in, they did like a pin-like prick of tissue, one staining. The people that they find CTE in, a quarter-like piece of tissue and two stains. They did two different types of testing. When you do that, that is corrupt science. You cannot come up with the same answer and do two different types of testing. So people don't read the methodology. That's not talked about. That paper right there is nonsense in a bunch of different levels.
Okay, let's put that aside. Even the NFL, in one case, has said, hey, there is a correlation. There's a link between CTE and football. In a congressional hearing, one of the NFL executives testified along those lines. You're kind of a lone voice in the wilderness saying, hey...
Well, first I'd have to ask you, where's the scientific literature that verifies that? I'm going to tell you this right now with scientific fact, with 100% certainty. I will give you the papers. It's on brainwashedbook.com. We give you the scientific literature. There's not one piece of scientific literature that says link in it. Not one scientific piece of literature. Yeah. There is no evidence that football or concussions are going to cause CTE. In my discovery, I talked to all these neuropathologists. They all said the same thing. We don't know what causes it. We don't know what it causes. We're in an observation state, Merril. There's 300 cases in the medical journal that have the pattern CTE. Over 100, never played football, never played sports, never had a history of head trauma, and never had a concussion. How do you answer those 100 cases?
Yeah. Merril Hoge, thank you so much
My
for
pleasure,
being here
brother.
today. Check out the book. Go to brainwashedbook.com if you want to read all of this and more.